Southern Syria, year 634. Two armies gather on a plain facing each other. On one side was the Byzantine army. On the other side was the army of Islamic Caliphate under the command of Shurahbil radhiyallahu anhu. The two armies charged each other with full might and the clash continued for several hours. Although the Muslims fought valiantly, the Byzantine army of superior numbers and weapons started to overpower them. The defeat of the Muslims seemed imminent. Right at that moment, dust started to gather near the horizon. Soon the ground also started to shake. Tearing through the curtain of dust emerged an army. They came riding their horses at lightning speed and with open swords in hand, thirsty for victory against the enemy. Leading the group was none other than Khalid ibn al-Walid radhiyallahu anhu, the sword of Allah. The new wave of Muslim troops pierced through the Byzantine lines. What was supposed to be a defeat for the Muslims soon turned into a victory. And with this event, the Muslim-Byzantine conflict reached a new chapter. We have to keep in mind that the Muslims and the Byzantines didn't start their fight in 634. Rather, the beginning of this conflict goes back several years earlier, during the lifetime of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The first of this conflict was the Battle of Mu'tah in 629. In that battle, the Muslims lost three great commanders, one after another, and eventually Khalid radhiyallahu anhu took command of the army. This was the first major battle that Khalid radhiyallahu anhu fought for the Muslims. In the end, the Muslims had to do a strategic retreat, and the result of the battle was inconclusive. It is also after this battle the Prophet ﷺ honored Khalid radhiyallahu anhu with the title of the Sword of Allah. If you want to know more about the Battle of Mu'tah, then please watch our earlier video on this topic. The link is in the description. Anyway, in the following year of the Battle of Mu'tah, the Prophet ﷺ launched a mission against the Byzantine. He led the Muslim army to Tabuk and waited there for some time for confronting the Byzantine troops. In the end, the Byzantines did not appear on the battlefield. The local tribes sold their allegiance to the Prophet ﷺ, and Tabuk became effectively the border between the Islamic State and the Byzantine Empire. The name of the Byzantine emperor during that time was Heraclius. During the time of the death of the Prophet ﷺ and the Caliphate of Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu, the whole of Syria, Palestine and Egypt was under the Byzantine rule. When Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu decided to expand the influence of the Islamic Caliphate beyond the Arabian Peninsula, he actually launched two campaigns more or less at the same time. One of those campaigns was against the Sassanid Empire, part of which we have covered in some of the previous episodes. The other campaign was against the Byzantine Empire, in which Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu sent 4 armies under 4 different commanders. The leader of these Muslim armies were Amr ibn al-As radhiyallahu anhu. His order was to lead his troops into Palestine, following a route through Elat. Yazid ibn Abu Sufyan. The objective given to him was to capture the center of Byzantine rule in Syria, the city of Damascus itself. Shurahbil bin Hassana radhiyallahu anhu. He was ordered to move with his troops through the region of Jordan and bring parts of southern Syria under Islamic Caliphate. Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Zarra radhiyallahu anhu. He was commanded to march toward Massa, establish a Muslim stronghold there to control the entire central and southern Syria. The exact location of the main Byzantine forces was not known to the Muslims at that point. So Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu ordered the 4 groups to always stay in touch with each other so that they could help any other group if needed by combining their forces. Abu Ubaidah radhiyallahu anhu was given the overall command of the campaign. In the first week of April 634, the army started their march from Medina. Yazid was the first to lead his army out of Medina, followed by Shurahbil, Abu Ubaidah, and Amr radhiyallahu anhu consecutively, each a day's march from the other. All of the 4 battalions marched towards Tabuk first. From there, each group took their own route. Yazid's group came in contact with small Christian Arab force on their way and could easily defeat them. After that, they crossed the valley of Araba and camped near the Byzantine defense line near Gaza. During the same time, Amr bin al-As radiallahu anhu reached Elat with his troops. After that, both Yazid and Amr radiallahu anhu attempted to enter the area of Palestine under Byzantine control. They each encountered 4 detachments sent by the Byzantine army. Both of the armies could defeat the Byzantine troops but did not approach the deeper territories beyond the Byzantine border. Abu Ubaidah and Shurahbil radiallahu anhu, on the other hand, could continue their march without any significant resistance. They reached the region between Bosra and Zabia in May 634. It is at this point the Byzantines realized the Muslims were launching a coordinated campaign against them. The Byzantine Emperor Heraclius received the news of the movements of the Muslim armies and began to plan countermeasures. He ordered Byzantine forces from different garrisons in northern Syria to gather at a place called Aznadin. From here, they planned to maneuver against the flank or rear of the rest of the Muslim corps that were in Jordan and southern Syria. Although Abu Ubaidah radiallahu anhu didn't know the detailed plan of the enemy, but he got news of enemy preparation. He sent a messenger to the Caliph with the updates. After receiving the update from Syria, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu decided to send Khalid ibn al-Walid radiallahu anhu to Syria, as he was the most experienced Muslim military commander at that point. In May of 634, Khalid radiallahu anhu received the order to travel to Syria as soon as possible and assumed the command of the entire Muslim army stationed in Syria. As we've seen in our previous episodes, he chose to cross the Red Desert with no water sources between Iraq and Syria with his troops. The most challenging part of the march was between the 2 wells along the way, one in Karakir in Iraq and other in Siwa in Syria. The desert between these 2 places were completely waterless, and it would take the Muslim army 6 days and 5 nights of almost continuous march to cross the desert. The Muslims under Khalid radiallahu anhu did not have enough water skins with them to carry sufficient water for this grueling march through the desert. But that did not stop them from finding an ingenious solution for the problem. They collected around 20 camels and fed them as much water as possible. After that, they sealed their mouths to prevent the camels from eating and consequently spoiling the water in their stomachs. During the march, when the army needed water, they had a number of the camels slaughtered and collected the water stored in the camels' stomachs. Using this tactic, the Muslims could cross the desert in 6 days without any significant loss to the strength of the army. This was a brilliant tactic in any measure. This allowed the Muslims to save a lot of travel time, and they could approach the Byzantines where the Byzantine defense was the weakest. As the Byzantine Empire was actually the Eastern Roman Empire at that time, so from now on we could just call them the Romans in the rest of the series. The Romans never expected any threat through the desert, so the eastern border of Syria was not heavily protected. Khalid radiallahu anhu and his men first reached Suwa and raided the town. From there, they started to march south towards Bosra. Along the way, his troops carried out raids, defeated the local tribes, and a vast territory along the eastern border of Syria came under Muslim control without any major conflict. When the Muslim troops under Khalid radiallahu anhu reached near Bosra, they heard about the confrontation between the Roman and the Muslim army taking place. So they could easily intercept the Romans during the battle and rescue the Muslims under Shurahbil radiallahu anhu's command from almost a certain defeat, which we have seen at the beginning of this episode. After the sudden arrival of the Muslims, the Roman army had to retreat inside the city of Bosra. The following day, the Roman army regrouped and came out of the city to fight the combined Muslim forces for another round. The battle started with a challenge from the commander of the Roman army for a duel. Abdurrahman ibn Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, who was the son of Caliph Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, accepted the challenge and defeated the Roman commander in the duel. the Roman commander had to flee the duel to save his life. The Muslims immediately launched a general attack along the entire front. For some time, the fighting continued without any group getting any upper hand, but after a while, the Muslim wings started causing damage to the Roman lines and forced them to step back. During this ongoing clash, another Muslim army under the command of Abu Ubaidah radiallahu anhu reached the battlefield. So the Romans had no other option but to retreat back inside the city yet again. The Muslims surrounded the city from all sides. After a few days of siege, the Roman commander of Busra decided to surrender to the Muslims. In the middle of July 634, the Muslims peacefully took control of Busra. At this point, the Muslim scouts brought the news of a large concentration of enemy forces at Aznadin and an imminent enemy counterattack. So Khalid radiallahu anhu commanded all the 4 Muslim armies stationed in Syria to march at once and assemble near Aznadin. A major clash between the Islamic Caliphate and the Romans is not avoidable any further.